Teaching and discipleship, honestly, they're core components of what we do in youth ministry. But what if your teaching sucks? I mean, listen, like, you probably think I'm here to sell you some sort of curriculum or something like that. That's not it, right? But what if what you're doing is not actually contributing to your students attending the way that you and, frankly, your boss want them to be attending? I mean, let's be honest. The entire reason that youth ministries exist is because we want to help teach students about Jesus. Jesus told us the aim, what we should be teaching our students, is to love God and to love others. And so the goal of all youth ministries would be to help students grow in that love of God and love of others. So today I want to talk to you about, number one, a great scope and sequence for your teaching calendar for your students. However, the problem, which we talked about in the video linked right here, is that 57% of regular churchgoers didn't go to church during the course of 1 month. And so we're going to talk in this video about the two key things that you actually need to address in your youth ministry and in your youth ministry space before you can even solve the attendance issues as it relates to teaching. And finally, I have the number one thing that you and I need to disciple our students. I think it's an ultimate game changer. Welcome to the Hybrid Ministry Show. Welcome everyone to the Hybrid Ministry Show. My name is Nick Clayson, coming at you during the flex week in between Christmas and New Year. At least that's when I'm recording. I almost forgot my glasses. I don't have my watch on. I got my new Christmas mug that my 5-year-old made for me at preschool. It's an amazing week, but we are still going strong in the 2024 Youth Ministry On Demand Masterclass. You're going to want to make sure that you subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Because we're going to lay out all of everything that I've ever learned in my 13 years of youth ministry experience. My name is Nick Clayson, youth pastor, now living and working in the DFW, Dallas, Texas area. But when we talk about scope and sequence, one of my favorite resources of all time, I mean, it's so dated. I mean, just look at the graphic here. If you're not watching on YouTube, you can see it. If not, you'll just have to go check out the show notes. But it's called 7 Checkpoints for Students. It's written by Andy Stanley. And I think it's just a really thorough and a really good swath of things that students need and should be learning as it pertains to what we teach them when they're in youth ministry. So some of those checkpoints, some of those things are: number 1, an authentic faith; number 2, spiritual disciplines; number 3, moral boundaries; number 4, meaningful friendships; number 5, wise choices; number 6, ultimate authority; and then finally number 7, putting others first. I mean, if you want to try to poke holes in that, there may be some things that you're like, that's missing here, that's missing there. But if we're to say love God, love others, you can almost go back through that, similar to what Jesus did with the 635 different commandments, and put all of them into a classification of love God, love others, right? So an authentic faith, that'd be love God, and spiritual disciplines, that's love God, and moral boundaries is a combination of the two, but I would probably put it in love others. And meaningful friendships is also love others, but there's also a benefit to us in that as well. Making wise choices is about loving others, and ultimate authority is probably about loving God, and finally putting others first, that's love others, right? And so if you break it down to those different categories, if you just have those 7 things sort of on your mind of okay, these are the main kind of core things that we want our students to learn. What I would do is I would kind of sprinkle those out throughout the year, kind of space them out, right? And so I'll just give you a quick snapshot into what we're doing in our student ministry. Again, I'm not trying to sell you any sort of curriculum. I don't have a curriculum to sell you, but there are a ton of different resources out there. YM360 sells series. DYM has series. They even have a new thing called Co-Leader. If you haven't checked that out, Co-Leader does everything for you, not just your message content, but also your slides and your small group questions and your games and your countdown and your worship. It does everything for you. It is, and it's much cheaper than some of the other content companies out there, say an XP3 or an Orange. But if you have the budget, you might want to try them out too, because they have a lot of really good resources. So back in September, what we talked about is we actually led the year off starting a few weeks early in August, kind of more in the back to school range. August 20th is when our students go back to school in Texas. And we did 3 ways how to not ruin your school year. That was kind of our focus. And it was basically if you don't connect with God, if you don't connect with others, if you're not in a small group, right? Like those are some of the ways in which you can like ruin your school year. Then we moved on in October and we talked about Elephants in the Room is one of my favorite series that we did. We talked about racism and cheating and bullying and some of the bigger kind of like hot topic things that like everyone knows are there, but like we don't really address them very often. Then we did a series called Gratitude or Gratitude. It was your typical Thanksgiving series. Then we did a Christmas series. And that's one of the tricky things, right? That's one of the tricky things about the scope and sequence is you only really get a few months and then you're kind of into your like Thanksgiving and your Christmas kind of vibes. In January, we're doing a series called Kings, and it is exploring 4 different kings of Israel. We got David, we got Joash, we got Rehoboam, and then we got Hezekiah. So everyone knows David, but the other 3 are a little bit less known, and it's about how to make the most of the hand that you're dealt. In February, we're going to look at like a biblical literacy type of thing and basically teaching students how to navigate the Bible, how to read it, why it's important, why the Bible should have, ultimate authority in your life. In March, we're going to do a Easter type series, and then we're going to end the year with faith's biggest questions, and we're going to, again, kind of zero in on some more hotter topic type of things. And so that's how we laid out our scope and our sequence. If you look back at Andy Stanley's, like some of them tie in there, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, like we're trying to give our students a good understanding of how to love God and how to love others. But the problem is that we've all been trying to navigate is what do we do when our students don't show up to hear what we have to teach them? So what do we do about this attendance conundrum? People are attending church less and less, especially post-pandemic. And so I think there are really like 2 things that we need to try and create in our student ministry. And these things actually have nothing to do with teaching, but if we create these things, they will enhance our teaching. And the first one is this: students need a place to belong. It's no longer if you build it, they will come. I worked at a large church in Cincinnati. Eric Geiger, who is now the lead pastor out of Mariners Church, he was the youth pastor there, and they built the space that I inherited for Eric Geiger. I don't think he ever made it into that building during his tenure there, but there were people that grew up in Eric's youth ministry, and they said that like that youth ministry was the talk of the town, and everyone liked to come in and play billiards. And so I inherited so many billiards tables, and that's like ultimately a curse because you can't actually move those things. And so that was sort of under the mindset that like if we build it, if we have this thing, they will come. But I think now it's shifting in a more digital sort of way, a more digital sort of mindset. I think students and teenagers are more thinking like, if my friends are here, then I'll show up. It has, and listen, you should still do a good job. You should still focus. You should still plan. You should still prep. But I think far less of that has to do anything with what you produce, what you put out there, what you're programming, and more. Are we creating a place for students to belong? I get it. It doesn't really sound very spiritual, and no amount of prep on your message is really going to help create some of that, right? But that really is, I think, the crux of where we find ourselves. That's the first one. The second thing is that students need to have ownership, and they will stick and they will stay attached to your youth ministry, especially the older they get and once they start getting keys and driver's license and cars, if they feel a sense of ownership of what's going on in our youth ministry. And so for teaching, right, to be good, you need students to find a place to belong. And you also want to help them find an opportunity to attach and be accessibly owning some of what your student ministry has to offer. So as far as your content goes, like you should care about your scope and sequence. You should pray about it. You should think about it. You should pore over it. However, oftentimes that isn't what is keeping, sticking, and attracting students, right? As far as the content goes, you can preach more than just the one time a week that you're live in the room with all of your students, right? And that's why I would actually make the argument that I think the internet is better for content delivery. Obviously, community, ownership, serving, prayer, some of those are not better on the internet, but content delivery and teaching can be done on the internet. And so if students and if people are attending 57% not coming to church during the course of a month, then I want to ask you to consider, would you think about the idea of going hybrid. When I say hybrid, I'm not just talking about only your online presence. I'm not just talking about only your in-person presence. I'm talking about a melding of the two. What can you produce? What can you put out there digitally? What kind of teaching content can you create? Can you do more podcasts? Can you do smaller bite-sized social media short type things? I have a fully laid out strategy right here, linked down below in my completely free ebook, and that will help you be able to focus on the belonging and the ownership pieces and still deliver content, because we need students to have content. We need students to learn things. We need students to be discipled. But the only way in which they're discipled does not have to be live and in the room. So as I said at the beginning, what is the ultimate number one thing that we need from our students? It's this: is we need to help create for them a meaningful attachment to Jesus. And when you choose to go hybrid, you can offer all of this content, all the content that you want in the world, paired with a warm community. And that really is the best of both worlds. Your environment matters, which is why I think the way in which we approach programming and games is such a crucial component of youth ministry, especially in the face of this mental health crisis that we're all facing with teenagers, helping students be able to laugh. And that video is linked right here on the screen, because we're making digital discipleship not only easy, but also accessible. So as always, don't forget, stay hybrid.